The crack of Finn's fist against my jaw was a familiar sound, a percussive beat to the bitter symphony of my life in this pack. I tasted blood, coppery and sharp, a stark contrast to the cloying scent of pine and wet earth that clung to every wolf here. I stumbled back, my body hitting the packed dirt of the training yard with a dull thud. Laughter, sharp and cruel as splintered glass, followed me down. "Get up, outcast," Finn sneered. He was the pack's enforcer, a mountain of muscle and petty cruelty, and his favorite hobby was reminding me of my place. A place somewhere beneath the dirt I was currently lying in. I pushed myself up slowly, deliberately. Every instinct screamed at me to retaliate, to let the beast inside uncoil and show this brute what real power looked like. Not yet. A voice inside me, worn thin from years of restraint, whispered back. Not here. They can't know. My name is Asher, but to them I'm just Harry, a stray wolf they took in out of a grudging sense of duty. They think I'm weak because I don't challenge them. They think I'm a coward because I hide from their cruelty. But the truth is a beast caged behind my ribs. A thing of shadow and fury with eyes like molten gold. It is a dire wolf, and it is the last of a royal bloodline. It is me, and I am the last true king. What's the matter, Asher? Finn taunted, circling me like a predator. Don't have the stomach for a real fight? I do, my wolf, Fenris snarled in my mind. He wants to tear through this facade, to rip this fool's throat out and remind them all of the blood that truly runs in my veins. But I won't let him. I can't. Not here. Not yet. I just shrugged, wiping the blood from my lip with the back of my hand. You win, Finn. I'm done. Finn's face twisted in disgust. Pathetic. My Luna would never choose a mate who can't even take a punch. He spat on the ground near my feet. But then no one is going to choose you at the ceremony tonight, are they? You're a stray dog we were foolish enough to let in. His words stung, but they were also a grim confirmation. My own pack had called me weak before they betrayed me, before they took everything. I had to be weak here. I had to be pathetic. Survival depended on it. More importantly, I had to keep the rage from boiling over because my control was slipping with every passing day. With every heartbeat, the beast inside me grew stronger, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep it chained. A deep, resonant horn blast suddenly echoed from the great hall, a sound that vibrated deep in my bones. The mating ceremony. It was starting. Finn smirked. Time for your big day, outcast. Try not to cry when they all laugh at you. He shoved my shoulder as he walked past, a final act of dominance. I stood alone in the yard, the cold morning air doing nothing to cool the fire in my chest. I didn't know what scared me more, the public rejection that was about to happen, or the terrifying possibility that this time, I wouldn't be able to stop the monster inside from answering the insult. The great hall buzzed. It was a hive of shimmering silks, glittering jewels, and the cloying scent of expensive perfume mixed with beeswax. I moved through it all like a ghost, my soft-soled shoes making no sound on the polished stone floors. My purpose was to be invisible, unseen, unheard. I had perfected it over years of practice. Don't be noticed, my mind chanted, the same rhythm I'd used since I was a child. Noticed is dangerous. I polished a silver goblet, my eyes downcast but aware of everything. I saw the noble she-wolves gathered by the hearth, their laughter like the tinkling of tiny, sharp bells. Can you imagine? One of them, a blonde named Jade, said with a dramatic shudder. Being forced to stand before that outcast. It's a disgrace, another agreed, fanning herself. Alpha Marcus should have never allowed a rogue with no history to stay. He smells of desperation and mud. They laughed again. My hands stilled. I risked a glance across the hall. I saw him there, the outcast. He stood near the shadows of a great pillar, separate from everyone else. His shoulders were slumped and his head was down. But there was a tension in him, a coiled stillness that didn't look like weakness to me. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see what they saw. They saw a stray dog. I saw a wolf forced into a cage. They saw a pathetic weakness. I saw a man enduring an agony they couldn't possibly comprehend. Deep down I knew the truth. I saw loneliness because it was the same thing I saw in my own reflection every morning. The memory of the fire hit me without warning, a phantom pain that was always there just beneath the surface. The smell of burning pine and blood. The screams of my family, my pack as they were slaughtered. I had been small, hidden, and had survived only because I'd learned to be invisible. I'd been a ghost ever since. Maybe it was fate that I saw a fellow ghost in him. Let the ceremony begin. Alpha Marcus's voice boomed, shaking me from the memory. He was a powerful alpha, his voice a force of nature that demanded obedience. He stood on the dais, his chest puffed with pride. It was his pack's most sacred tradition, the night of the full moon when mates were chosen, when bonds were forged that would last a lifetime. For some it was a night of hope. For me it was just another night to survive, another night to remain unseen. But as the first highborn female was called forward, I found my gaze drifting back to the man in the shadows, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt something other than numb emptiness. It was a strange, dangerous pang of something that felt an awful lot like recognition. And now, Alpha Marcus announced, his voice laced with a dismissive tone that made the crowd titter, we present Asher. The name felt like a brand, a lie he was forced to walk from the shadows into the center of the great hall. 1,000 pairs of eyes descended upon him, heavy and sharp as stones. The air thickened, charged with disdain and morbid curiosity. This was the part of the show they'd all been waiting for, the humiliation of the outcast. My goal was simple, endure. Breathe in. Breathe out. Do not let the wolf out. Jade, the blonde from the hearth, was the first one called. She sauntered towards him, her hips swaying, her expression a mask of theatrical disgust. She circled him once, her nose wrinkled as if she smelled something foul. No, she said, her voice loud and clear for everyone to hear. I would rather mate with a toad. The crowd roared with laughter. Asher's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes fixed on a crack in the stone floor. Breathe. Next, a brunette with cold eyes. She didn't even circle him. She just shook her head from 10 feet away. He is not worthy. Dismissal. Another wave of laughter. Another and another. Each one a fresh sting, a new nail hammered into the coffin of his pride. They called him scrawny, though he was coiled with the power of a king. They called him weak, though he could have snapped any one of them in two with a single motion. They called him worthless, and that one hit closest to home because a part of him believed it. The part that had been betrayed by his own kin still screamed that it had been his fault. To make things worse, with every rejection, the beast inside him grew more agitated. It paced the confines of his soul, snarling, rattling its cage. It hated this. It hated them. It wanted out. The final noble she-wolf, a timid girl pushed forward by her ambitious father, simply whispered, I can't, and scurried away. And then silence. A profound, echoing silence that was louder than all the laughter combined. It was over. He had been publicly, universally, and utterly rejected. Alpha Marcus cleared his throat, ready to officially end the farce and send him back to the shadows. In that moment I felt it, a pressure building behind my eyes. The first sign that I was losing control. The rage was a living thing inside me, a tidal wave of fire and fury, and it was about to break free. Frick. The sound of shattering pottery ripped through the silence. I had dropped a heavy ceramic pitcher. Every head turned. Before I could move, I stepped out from the shadows. It was me, the quiet one. The ghost. The one who moved as if I was trying to take up no space in the world at all. My simple brown dress was plain, my face pale, my hands trembling. Without warning, I walked toward him. The crowd murmured, confused. I stopped a few feet in front of him, right there in the center of the hall, and looked up. My eyes, a soft, gentle brown, met his. There was no pity in them. No disgust. There was something else, something I hadn't seen in years. As the silence stretched, my lips parted and my voice, though it trembled, cut through the entire world. Are you okay? The silence that followed my question was a physical thing. It was colder and heavier than the air in any prison cell. A collective gasp, sharp and unified, rippled through the crowd. What followed was a flood of whispers, hissing and venomous, slithering through the hall like a nest of snakes. A servant, someone muttered. She has a death wish. How dare she? Jade's face, the one who had called him a toad, was a mask of pure, contorted fury. Every noble she-wolf looked as though I had just spat on their most sacred idol. Maybe I had. I didn't know the rules, not really. I only knew how to be invisible, and I had just broken my one and only law. To make things worse, Alpha Marcus's face was slowly turning a shade of deep, mottled purple. His fists were clenched at his sides, his chest swelling with a rage so profound it seemed to suck all the air from the room. his authority, his sacred ceremony, his entire world order had just been challenged by a girl who served him water. But my gaze found Asher's again. The moment our eyes locked, the noise, the anger, the entire world just faded away. The shock was still there in his eyes, a deep, resounding shock that mirrored my own. But beneath it I saw something else stir. Something ancient, something powerful. A flicker of a golden light, like a dying ember being coaxed back to life by a sudden gust of wind. He wasn't looking at me like I was a servant or a fool or a madwoman. He was looking at me like he was seeing the sun for the first time after a lifetime of darkness. My breath caught. Insolence. Alpha Marcus's voice was not a shout. It was a roar, a physical force that slammed into me, making me flinch. You dare defile this sacred right? You nothing. The magic of the moment was gone, ripped away by the Alpha's fury. The terror came rushing back, cold and sharp, and I felt my knees tremble. I had made a terrible, fatal mistake. Guards. Marcus bellowed, pointing a thick, trembling finger directly at me. Seize this filth. Throw her in the cells. We will make an example of her. Without thinking, my eyes snapped back to Asher one last time. A silent, desperate plea. Help me. His voice cut through the red haze of my panic like a sliver of moonlight through a storm cloud. For a moment the world didn't make sense. The jeers, the laughter, the burning shame. It all just vanished, replaced by my question. My absurd, reckless, perfect question. Are you okay? The absurdity of it almost made him laugh. I was asking him if he was okay. This man who had just committed an act of courage so profound, so reckless, that it defied all logic in their brutal, power-obsessed world. He was stunned because my choice was not an act of pity. It was an act of defiance. I wasn't trying to save a poor outcast. I was standing up to the cruelty of the entire room. And his wolf, for the first time in years, wasn't snarling with rage. Between one breath and the next, something inside him shifted. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through his very bones, a feeling of recognition, of rightness. His soul, battered and scarred as it was, answered mine. This wasn't a mate chosen for status or power or bloodlines. This was a choice. A choice made from the heart in the face of absolute scorn. A choice that made me more worthy than any queen who had ever lived. He saw the fear in my eyes as Marcus roared, but he also saw the iron will behind it. I stood my ground for him. No one had stood for him in a very, very long time. He had a choice to make right here, right now. He could let them take me, and he could slink back to his shadows, his pathetic, safe existence secured for another day. He could let me pay the price for my courage. Or he could light the match and burn the whole world down. As the guards started to move, their heavy boots thudding on the stone, my decision was made. I met her terrified, pleading gaze, and for the first time in my exile, I let a flicker of my true self show. Gang. The Alpha. The Protector. I gave her a single, firm nod. And then I spoke. My voice was quiet, not a shout like the Alpha's, but it carried a weight of ancient authority that cut through the noise and made the guards hesitate. Yes. The word was a vow, a promise, a declaration of war. A new wave of shock washed over the hall. This one was laced with confusion and fear. Why was the outcast acting like this? Who did he think he was? Alpha Marcus's face went from rage to outright disbelief. What did you say, boy? Have you both lost your minds? I gave an order. Take the girl. The guards lunged. But then I moved. I didn't lunge or snarl. I simply stepped in front of Cora, shielding her with my body. It was a simple, quiet act, but it was also a challenge. To the guards. To the Alpha. To everyone. I raised my head, and for the first time, I let them see the cold, golden fire burning in my eyes. And for the first time they saw not an outcast but a predator. The world exploded into chaos. One moment I was an outcast, a statue of quiet endurance. The next I was a wall of solid, unyielding force between Cora and the charging guards. I moved with a speed that didn't seem real, a blur of motion that was both terrifying and beautiful. But there were too many of them. Without warning, a rough hand clamped down on Cora's arm, yanking her sideways. She cried out, her feet scrambling for purchase on the slick floor. Another guard grabbed her other arm. They were brutally strong, their fingers digging into her skin like claws. Asher, she screamed, her voice thin with panic. I saw her turn, her face a mask of cold fury I had never seen before. A low, guttural growl ripped from my chest, A sound so deep, so primal, that it vibrated through the floor and up into her bones. It wasn't human. Not even close. For a second the guards holding her actually faltered, their eyes wide with a sudden instinctual fear. What was he? But then Alpha Marcus's order cut through their hesitation. Take him down too. I want them both in the cells. Just like that, my hope was extinguished. The guards swarmed me, a wave of muscle and fury. I was overwhelmed by sheer numbers. What followed was a brutal, chaotic blur. I was hauled from the great hall, down a long winding staircase that led deep into the earth. The air grew cold and damp, smelling of mildew, wet stone and old despair. This was where they kept prisoners. Rogues. Traitors. Me. The guards didn't say a word. They just dragged me to the end of the corridor, to the darkest, grimmest cell. They wrenched open a heavy iron door, the sound of it groaning in protest echoing in the narrow hall. Without another word they threw me inside. My body hit the damp, grimy floor with a painful thud. Before I could even scramble to my knees, the iron door slammed shut. The sound was a deafening final boom that sealed my fate. A heavy wooden bar was dropped into place on the other side. And then darkness. A complete and total absence of light. A thick, suffocating blackness that pressed in on me from all sides. My old life, my invisible, lonely but safe life, was over. I had made a choice in the light. A single impulsive choice, born from a moment of courage, and it had led me here. To a cold, dark cage. Alone and terrified. The silence roared in my ears, broken only by the frantic, terrified beating of my own heart. I curled into a ball on the cold floor, the last of my bravery draining away. I had done something good, something brave, and it had led to my doom. And his. The darkness of the cell was a familiar cloak. I had spent years hiding in shadows after all. But this was different. This darkness was cold, absolute, and reeked of stale fear and damp stone. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, not in defeat but in waiting. The chaos of the great hall had settled into a low, simmering rage inside me, a tightly controlled inferno. They had taken her because of me. And because of that, this pack house had just become a tomb. I listened. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, followed by the low, rumbling voices of two guards. Can't believe the Alpha is that furious over a servant, one voice grumbled. It's just a girl. It's not just the girl, you idiot, the other shot back, his voice sharp. It's the principal. And more importantly, Lord Alaric's emissary is arriving in 2 days. Alpha Marcus can't afford to look weak, not with Alaric watching his every move. The name Alaric slammed into my gut like a physical blow. My uncle. The man who sat on a throne of bone and blood. The man who wanted me erased from existence. So Marcus wasn't just a proud alpha. He was a puppet. Which meant this was no longer just about pack politics. Still, what are we going to do with them? The first guard asked. The outcast put up a hell of a fight. He's just a stray dog showing his teeth. Come morning, the alpha will make an example of them both. A public one. The footsteps faded, leaving behind only the dripping of water and the heavy weight of their words. A public example. They were going to kill her. To punish me. The inferno inside me broke its chains. I rose to my feet, silent as a shadow. I reached for the lock on my cell door, a crude, heavy iron thing. My fingers wrapped around the cold metal. I took a breath, not to calm myself but to focus the storm. I wasn't just an outcast, and I wasn't just a survivor. I was the son of a king, trained by warriors who could turn men to dust. And I let a fraction of that truth out. The lock groaned. It protested. And then, with a sound like a giant sigh, it snapped. The metal, thick as my wrist, simply broke. I pushed the door open without a sound. The corridor was empty. I moved down it, not with the shuffle of an outcast, but with the lethal grace of a predator. I passed cell after cell until I reached the last one, the one where they had thrown her. I could smell it, the faint scent of wild flowers that clung to her, mixed with the sharp, acidic tang of her terror. I didn't bother with the lock this time. I placed my hands on the heavy iron door and pushed. The wood around the hinges splintered, the metal bar on the other side bent, groaned, and then shot out of its brackets with a deafening crack that echoed like a gunshot. The door swung inward into absolute blackness. I heard a small, terrified gasp from inside. "Cora," I whispered, my voice a low rumble in the quiet that followed. I heard her scramble backward, deeper into the darkness. She was terrified of me. The truth of that was a fresh wound. "They're going to kill you," I said, my voice raw with an urgency she had to believe. "To make a point. They won't let you live until morning." I took a step into the cell, my eyes adjusting to the gloom, seeing her huddled form in the far corner. "We have to go. Now." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic trapped bird in a cage. My terror of the guards of Alpha Marcus had been absolute, but now a new, more primal fear had replaced it. The creature in front of me, the man I had seen in the great hall, the outcast, had become something else entirely. The door was splintered and broken, the metal bar bent like it was a twig. And the look in his eyes. I had only seen that level of intensity in a wild predator cornered and ready to kill. I scrambled backward, hitting the cold stone wall, the rough texture of it biting into my back. "Don't," I whispered, my voice raw. "Don't come any closer." He stopped a few feet away, a looming shadow in the suffocating darkness. I could still smell the copper of his blood, the earthy scent of a wolf. But now there was a new scent, an intoxicating musky aroma that spoke of raw power and untamed wilderness. It was the scent of an alpha, but one unlike any I had ever smelled before. "Cora," he said again, his voice softer this time but still deep, a low rumble that vibrated through the floor and into my bones. "It's me, Asher. The guards are coming. We have to go." How did you do that?" I stammered, my eyes flicking from the mangled door to his imposing frame. My whole world had just been turned upside down. The pack hierarchy was a sacred law, and he had just broken it like it was nothing. He was supposed to be weak. He was supposed to be pathetic. But there was nothing weak or pathetic about the man who had just ripped apart a metal door with his bare hands. "There's no time," he insisted, taking a slow step towards me. "Listen to me, Cora. They will not wait until morning to make an example of you. You are a loose end. An embarrassment to Alpha Marcus. They will kill you to save face. You have to trust me." Trust. The word felt like a hollow lie in my mouth. Trust was for fools, for children. My parents had trusted. They had trusted in a peaceful life. A fire had shown me what that kind of trust got you. I was an orphan, a ghost, because of it. Why should I asked, a fresh wave of panic rising in my chest. "You're a rogue. A murderer. You could be a monster. And you're the reason I'm here in the first place." His silence was a fresh pain. I saw his shoulders slump just for a moment, a flash of the Asher I thought I knew. The outcast. The boy who was all bruised bones and defeated eyes. "I know," he said, his voice a whisper. "And I'm sorry. But I'm not a monster. Not to you. I promise." He held out a hand in the darkness. "Please. I can get us out. We have to run." I stared at his hand. It was scarred, calloused, but it wasn't a claw. The terror was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now mixed with a strange and desperate hope. The guards would be coming back. I had a choice. Stay here and face the Alpha's punishment, or trust this frightening, powerful stranger who had just risked everything for me. The choice was no choice at all. I took his hand. His fingers were long and strong, and they closed around mine, a solid warmth in the damp, cold air. It wasn't a gentle grip, but it wasn't rough either. It was the grip of a man who was used to holding on tight. "Follow me," he said, his voice low and urgent. He led me through the cells, not using the corridor but slipping through a hidden passage behind the last cell. The passage was narrow, a tight squeeze that smelled of wet earth and old secrets. I had never known it was here. The air was still and suffocating, and I had to duck low to avoid hitting my head on the low ceiling. "Where are we going?" I whispered. "To the old drainage tunnels," he murmured back. "They're forgotten. Abandoned. No one will think to look for us there." My mind reeled. How did he know about a secret passage? How did he know about abandoned drainage tunnels? I had lived in this pack for over a decade and I had never heard of them. The thought of this quiet, pathetic boy, secretly mapping out a pack house he was barely tolerated in, was a thought that sent a fresh shiver down my spine. The outcast was a lie. The whole thing was a lie. And it was all a part of a plan he'd been executing for a long, long time. He led me for what felt like miles, through the winding, twisting tunnels, his grip on my hand never faltering. The darkness was absolute, but he moved with a practiced ease, his feet sure and silent on the slimy stone floor. I stumbled, my feet catching on a loose rock, and he pulled me up without a word. Last I saw it. A sliver of pale moonlight, thin as a thread, shining through a crack in the stone. We were close to the surface. He stopped, his grip on my hand tightening, and pulled me back behind a rock. I heard it then, the faint sound of voices above us. Guards. They have to be here somewhere, a voice said, sounding weary. How did he even get out? I don't know, but the Alpha wants them found before sunrise. He's furious. Said the emissary arrives in 2 days and he won't be made to look like a fool in front of him. Alaric is coming? Another voice asked, a tremor of fear in his tone. The Lord of the North? That's the one. Let's just hope he doesn't find out about this little incident. The footsteps faded, the voices died down, and the world was silent again, save for the thumping of my own heart. I hadn't realized how important my timing was. I hadn't just interrupted a ceremony. I had interrupted a political maneuver. I had placed myself, and by extension Asher, in the crosshairs of a conflict that was far bigger than I could have ever imagined. We need to get out of the city limits, he whispered, releasing my hand. It's safer there. I nodded, my throat tight. And then what? I asked, my voice barely audible. Then we run, he said, his eyes meeting mine in the gloom. And we don't stop until we're so far from here that they'll never find us. The air outside was cold, the moon a brilliant white orb in a cloudless sky. The world smelled of pine and damp earth, a familiar scent that now held a fresh new terror. We ran. I was a fast runner, a talent I had cultivated from years of running from danger. But he was something else entirely. He was a force of nature. He ran with a silent, graceful power that was terrifying to behold. He moved like a shadow, a blur of motion, his body an engine of pure, unadulterated strength. We ran all night, a silent, desperate race against the dawn. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't dare complain. I knew if I stopped it was over. He never even seemed to breathe hard. He was a machine, a relentless force of nature. As the first rays of the sun began to paint the sky with a soft, gentle pink, we stopped. We had reached a dense thicket of trees on the edge of the great forest. The pack's territory ended here. We were safe. For now. He collapsed against a thick tree trunk, his shoulders heaving. He was a mess of scrapes, bruises, and torn clothes. But the moment his gaze met mine, his eyes were clear and alert, the gold in them burning with an intensity that took my breath away. He was an alpha. I was sure of it now. My instincts, my very soul screamed it at me. He was in disguise, but he was an alpha. The question was, what kind of alpha? We need to find a place to rest, he said, his voice raspy. A shelter. Something. I nodded, my mind too tired to form a coherent thought. My body ached, my muscles screamed, and I was starving. I had never been on my own before. Never. My entire life had been defined by the walls of the pack house, by the endless, grueling work and the silent, lonely servitude. And now I was a rogue. An outcast. With an outcast. He led the way, his instincts guiding him with a preternatural grace I could only envy. He was home here in the wild in a way he had never been in the pack house. He found a cave nestled deep in the rocks, hidden by a waterfall and a tangle of thick ivy. It was small, but it was dry. And most importantly, it was hidden. We sat on the cold stone floor, the sound of the waterfall a constant, soothing white noise. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows. My mind felt like a tangled mess of broken glass and shattered dreams. I had so many questions, but I was afraid to ask any of them. I know what you're thinking, he said, his voice quiet, breaking the silence. You think I'm a monster. That I'm not what I said I was. I didn't answer. The truth was, I didn't know what to think. I'm not a stray, he said, his eyes fixed on the entrance of the cave. I'm the son of the king of the Western Territories. Or I was. They killed him. They killed everyone. They killed my entire pack. I was the only one who survived. My heart went out to him. The fire. The screams. The loneliness. I had known that story all too well. I'm sorry, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I know what that's like. He turned to me, his eyes wide with a fresh, startling surprise. You do. I nodded, pulling up the cuff of my dress. My arm was crisscrossed with thin silver scars. The fire, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I was just a child. They took everything from me. My family. My home. My name. The pack found me wandering the roads and they took me in. They gave me work. They told me my name was Cora. My real name, the one my mother had given me, felt like a sacred thing I wasn't allowed to speak. I've been a ghost ever since. His gaze softened. The predator was gone, replaced by a quiet, understanding empathy. He reached out and touched my arm, his fingers tracing the thin, silver lines of my scars. A fresh jolt, a spark of something so powerful it almost made me cry out, shot up my arm and into my chest. His touch felt like coming home. They did that to me too, he said, his voice thick with a shared sorrow. They took my name, my identity. They made me a stray and outcast. I ran from my family's killers. I ran until I ended up here in this pack. I thought I would be safe here. So you're a king? I asked, the words feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue. Disguised as a stray? He nodded, a grim expression on his face. My pack was ambushed. My uncle Alaric. He wanted the throne. He wants to wipe out my entire bloodline. He's the one coming here to this pack. He's their Lord of the North. Marcus is his puppet. He wanted me for himself. He wanted to kill me slowly. I swallowed hard, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The mating ceremony wasn't just a ceremony. It was a spectacle. A public humiliation designed to break him completely. But I had ruined it. I had been a part of this monstrous game and I had unknowingly stumbled into the middle of it and ruined everything. I had saved him, but I had doomed myself. Thank you, he said, his voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. For what you did. You didn't know who I was. You didn't know what you were risking. My heart felt so full I thought it might burst. The terror was still there, a constant companion, but it was now overshadowed by a fierce, protective feeling I had never felt before. It was the right thing to do, I said, my voice firm. They were cruel. I had to do something. He looked at me for a long, quiet moment, 1,000 emotions flashing in his eyes. A flicker of hope. A deep, abiding sadness. And something else. Something like gratitude. What's your real name? I asked, my voice a whisper. Asher is my name. The one my mother gave me, he said, his lips twitching into a ghost of a smile. They can take everything, but they can't take that. He was still just Asher. A broken boy with a king's soul. And I was still just Cora. A ghost with a beating heart. We were both broken, both lost. But for the first time in a very long time I didn't feel so alone. And for the first time in my life I wasn't running from the darkness. I was running with it. I had a choice. A terrible, wonderful, terrifying choice. And I had made it. I had chosen him. Chapter 4, The Wild North. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The words hung in the cold, cave air, heavy with a truth that was both terrifying and strangely beautiful. He was Asher, the lost prince, a true king. And I was Cora, the ghost of a dead pack. We had been running all night, not from Marcus but from something far older and more dangerous. From the past. We spent the rest of the day in that cave. He foraged for food, moving through the forest with a silence that still unnerved me. I kept watch, my eyes and ears straining for any sign of a search party. He returned with a couple of rabbits and a handful of berries, and for the first time in my life I wasn't just given food. I was given a share of what he had hunted. A quiet, simple act of companionship that felt more precious than gold. As the sun began to set, he sat across from me, his face illuminated by the faint glow of the small, smokeless fire he had made. We were a pair of fugitives, a prince and a maid, hiding in a cave. It was a story I had read 1,000 times in the books I had secretly hoarded in the servants' quarters, but living it was altogether different. The romance of it was gone, replaced by the grim reality of survival. We can't stay here, he said, his voice low. Not with Alaric coming. He'll send out his best hunters, the ones who track with more than just scent. We need to get out of his territory entirely. Where do we go? I asked, a flicker of my old anxiety returning. My world had always been so small, so contained. The thought of venturing into the great unknown was a chilling prospect. North, he said, his golden eyes fixed on mine. To the Winterstone pack. Their alpha, Lord Fenrir, was my father's most trusted friend. He'll give us sanctuary. He'll believe me. The name Winterstone sent a fresh jolt through me. It was a name I knew. A pack that was feared for its brutal traditions, its powerful warriors and its relentless loyalty. I didn't say anything. I just watched him, the firelight dancing in his eyes. They won't be like Marcus's pack, he reassured me as if he could read my mind. They're loyal. They're honorable. They won't see you as an outcast. I looked down at my hands. But I am an outcast, I whispered. To them, I'm just a human who smells of a different pack. I'm a risk. An unknown. What if they're like the others? What if they see me and turn you away? What if they see me and try to use me against you? He reached out and gently took my hand, his thumb stroking my skin. The spark, the connection, the warmth that had been a fleeting presence in the dark, was now a solid, comforting reality. You don't understand, he said, his voice raw. You are not an outcast. Not to me. You are a truth in a world full of lies. You are the only person who has ever looked at me and not seen a broken boy or a future king. You just saw a person. That is the most powerful thing in the world, Cora. The words felt like a balm, a healing ointment on a wound I didn't even know I had. I had spent my entire life trying to be invisible, trying to not be seen, and in this one moment with this man I was finally seen. And it was enough. We left the cave at dawn. Our journey was a silent, tense, and constant race against time. He was a master of the wild, a phantom in the trees, a ghost in the shadows. He moved through the thick undergrowth with a quiet, lethal grace that was breathtaking to witness. He taught me to move with purpose, to step on fallen leaves and dead twigs without a sound. He showed me how to read the whispers of the wind, the subtle shifts in the air, the tracks of every animal, every wolf, every hunter. He taught me to hunt, to track, to listen. The maid who had scrubbed floors was gone, replaced by a girl who was learning to survive in a world she had never known existed. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. Our bond, born of a single moment in a crowded hall, had become a living, breathing thing. It was a silent conversation, a constant stream of unspoken thoughts and emotions. I felt his exhaustion, his frustration, his loneliness, and his unwavering determination. I knew when he was worried. I knew when he was angry. I knew when he was thinking about the past. And he, in turn, knew when I was afraid. He knew when my body was screaming for rest. He knew when I was hungry. He would simply stop, turn to me, and offer a hand, a piece of food, a quiet word of encouragement. It was a partnership, an unspoken promise of loyalty and trust. On the third night of our journey, we made camp in a hidden grove near a winding river. It was the first time in what felt like a lifetime that I felt safe. I was sitting by the fire, mending a tear in his cloak when I heard him. He was speaking in a low, grumbling voice, a strange sound that seemed to be coming from the depths of his chest. I can't believe I'm still talking to you, he grumbled. You're a useless beast. You nearly got us killed back there. I looked up, confused. He was sitting alone, his back against a tree, his eyes closed. He looked tired. So tired. As if he was fighting a war inside himself. You're a disgrace to our bloodline, he said, his voice laced with venom. A fool. A pathetic coward. You should have let them take her. You should have let her go. A shiver of fear went down my spine. Who was he talking to? Was he talking to himself? Was this what he meant when he said he was fighting a war? The memory of his eyes, filled with that golden light, the sheer raw power I had seen. It all came rushing back to me. He was not a man. He was two souls in one body. A king and a beast. He opened his eyes and saw me staring at him, my heart in my throat. The anger and self-loathing vanished from his face, replaced by a deep, heartbreaking sadness. I'm sorry, he said, his voice raw. I didn't mean for you to see that. It's just, he gets loud sometimes. Who? I whispered, my voice trembling. My wolf. Fenris. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. He's been chained for so long. He wants out. He wants to tear down the world for what they did to us. And sometimes he blames me for not letting him. He looked at me, a profound pain in his golden eyes. He blames me for trusting them. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated empathy. I knew that feeling. The rage, the fury, the desire to tear down the world for what it had taken from you. My own rage was a familiar companion. It was what had kept me alive all these years. It was what had made me step out of the shadows in that hall. I wanted to tell him that his wolf was right. I wanted to tell him that sometimes, the only way to survive is to become a monster. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat there in the quiet darkness, and for the first time, I felt an understanding between us that went deeper than words. He was a king who was hated for his strength. I was a maid who was despised for her weakness. We were two broken halves of a whole, two sides of the same coin. He had a wolf. I had a ghost. And together we were running from a world that had betrayed us both. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was a silent conversation, a promise of loyalty and trust. A bond that had been forged in the crucible of a public ceremony, and was now being tested by the long, cold night. Chapter 5. The Smell of Treachery. The silence that followed was a strange kind of peace. It was broken only by the crackle of our small fire and the low, steady sound of Asher's breathing as he fell asleep. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind was a battlefield of 1,000 new truths. He was a king. I was a ghost. His uncle, a man I now knew as Lord Alaric, had slaughtered my pack. It was a truth so monstrous, so immense that it threatened to drown me. I watched Asher as he slept. The firelight flickered on his face, softening the hard lines of his jaw and highlighting the dark circles under his eyes. He was not a king. Not right now. He was just a boy who had lost everything, a boy burdened with the ghost of a dead pack. And in that moment, for the first time in a very long time, I felt something other than fear. I felt a profound, all-consuming sense of purpose. I had to help him. I had to protect him. He was not a monster. The monsters were the ones who had destroyed our lives. The next morning we were up at dawn. The air was cold and crisp and the scent of the forest was clean and sharp. Asher hunted again, his movements a fluid, silent dance in the trees. I foraged for berries and herbs, my senses, honed by years of silent observation, now hyper-aware of everything around me. I found a cluster of winter root, a rare herb that helped with pain and exhaustion, and I made a poultice from it, which I forced him to put on his cuts and bruises. He winced at first, but then a look of surprise and gratitude crossed his face. He hadn't expected me to be useful in this way. I had been a ghost for so long, a servant who just washed dishes and scrubbed floors. I had never been a healer before. It felt good. It felt right. We continued our journey north. We moved with a new sense of urgency, no longer just running but fighting. We were two ghosts in a haunted forest and we were coming for our justice. We were moving as a unit, a two-wolf pack bound by a shared enemy and a fragile, growing trust. On the 5th day we found what we were looking for, a small, hidden caravan of supplies. It wasn't Marcus's or Alaric's. It was a neutral caravan filled with food, cloaks and weapons. Asher, with a low, dangerous growl, was about to go for the kill. But I stopped him. "No," I whispered. "Don't." He looked at me, a flash of pure, primal fury in his golden eyes. "They have food, Cora. We need it." "I know," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "But these aren't our enemies. These are traitors. They're just trying to survive, just like us. If you take their supplies, they will report us. They will call us rogues. We can't afford to make enemies, not now. We need allies." The fury in his eyes vanished, replaced by a deep, unwavering surprise. He looked at me, truly looked at me, and saw not just a scared maid but a strategist. A leader. He was a king and he had been focused on a straight line. Revenge. I had been a ghost and I had been focused on survival. My mind, trained by years of quiet observation, saw a different path. A more subtle, more dangerous path. He nodded, a slow, grudging acceptance. "What do we do then?" I smiled, a small, triumphant smirk that I hadn't known I had. "We make them an offer," I said. "We trade our secrets for their silence. We tell them who we are. We tell them that their supplies are not safe and that Alaric's men are close. They will want our protection. We will give it to them. And in return we will get their loyalty." We did just that. It was the first time I had ever spoken to anyone besides a servant in my life. It was terrifying and exhilarating. I explained my plan, my voice trembling at first but gaining strength with every word. I saw the look in their eyes. Disbelief. Fear. But then they looked at Asher, at the raw, untamed power in his golden eyes. And then they looked at me, the little maid with the haunted eyes, and they saw a connection. They saw a bond. They saw a future. They agreed. Not because they trusted us but because they were desperate. They were tired of living in fear, tired of being hunted. Asher was a king. I had been a ghost. And together we were building an army. We were not just two people on the run anymore. We were a promise. A whisper of a rebellion. And that whisper, it was spreading. But then we heard it. A single howl, low and mournful, cutting through the forest. It was a hunting call. and it was followed by another and another. Alaric's men. They were close. They had found us. Asher's entire body tensed. "We have to go," he said, his voice a low, urgent growl. Yow. We didn't run. We moved. We became one with the night, a silent, deadly force moving through the trees. We had to get to the mountain passes. We had to get to the Winterstone pack. But Alaric's men were faster. They were trained. They were relentless. We were near the end of our journey, the snow-capped peaks of the mountains a dark silhouette against the moonlight, when we stumbled upon an old, abandoned hunting cabin. It was small and dilapidated, but it would have to do. We ducked inside, our bodies heaving with exhaustion. We had been running for a day and a night with no food, no water, and no rest. We were at our limit. Asher's face was pale, his eyes burning with a feverish light. I looked at his leg and saw it then, a deep, vicious gash. It was infected. My heart sank. He was a king, but he was still just a man. He was still just a wolf. He was still just a soul with a body that could bleed. "We can't stop here," I whispered, my voice thick with desperation. "They'll find us." He shook his head, a grim smile on his face. "I know," he said, his voice raspy. "But I won't let them take you. Not again." He stood in front of the door, his body a solid, unyielding wall. He was a king protecting his queen. A wolf protecting his mate. The rage in his eyes was a living thing. He was ready to die to save me. He was ready to burn the whole world down. "Don't," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Please. I can't lose you." He turned to me and the rage in his eyes vanished, replaced by a deep, unwavering vulnerability. "You won't," he said, his voice a promise. "I won't let you." And then we heard it. A single, triumphant howl right outside the door. Alaric's men. They had found us. We were trapped. There was nowhere to run. The final battle had begun and we were out of time. Chapter 6. The Unspoken Vow. The triumphant howl outside the cabin door was a sound that shattered the stillness of the night. It was followed by a chorus of answering growls, the heavy thud of boots on frozen ground, and the metallic clank of steel. We were surrounded. There was nowhere to run. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate thing. I looked at Asher, his face pale with fever, and for the first time I saw it. The fear. Not of death but of failure. He had come so far, fought so hard, only to be cornered here in a broken-down cabin with me. "Asher," I whispered, reaching for him. "The wound. You can't fight them like this." He shook his head, his jaw set in a grim line. "I have to. I won't let them take you, Cora. Not again. I'd rather die." His words hit me like a physical blow. He was a king, but he was willing to die for a ghost. A maid he had known for less than a week. My fear, my desperation, my exhaustion, it all vanished, replaced by a cold, hard resolve that felt like steel in my veins. He wasn't the only one with a monster inside. My ghost, the one that had kept me invisible for a decade, had a fire in its belly and it was ready to burn. "You're not going to die," I said, my voice steady, my eyes meeting his. "Not tonight. We're going to fight. Together." He looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his fever-bright eyes. You can't. They're Alaric's blood-sworn. They're trained killers. And I'm a survivor," I said, my chin held high. "I survived a massacre. I survived Marcus. I'm not going to let a bunch of glorified thugs stop me now. We have to buy some time." I didn't give him a chance to argue. I moved to the back of the cabin. It was old and rotting, the wood brittle with age. I picked up a loose floorboard and with a grunt of effort pulled it free. It left a hole in the cabin wall just big enough for a small person to squeeze through. "Get out," I said. "Go get help. I'll slow them down." He stared at me, a storm of emotions raging in his golden eyes. "No," he said, the word a low growl. "I won't leave you. You have to," I insisted, a fierce urgency in my voice. "My life is not worth a kingdom. Your life is. Get out there, get help, and then come back for me. Don't worry about me. I'm a ghost, remember? I'm good at disappearing." He didn't move. He just stood there, a wall of pure stubbornness. I knew what he was thinking. He was a king. He was a protector. He had a duty to save me, not to run away and leave me behind. But I had a duty to protect him. "This is not a debate, Asher," I said, my voice firm. "This is an order. Your life is not your own. It belongs to your people, to the ghosts of 1,000 kings. Go. Now. He flinched. The word king felt like a brand, a reminder of a responsibility he was not yet ready to take on. But he also saw the unyielding resolve in my eyes. He saw the same defiance that had made me step out into the great hall. He saw the fire that had burned in my heart for a decade. He saw a queen. And for the first time he submitted. He simply nodded, a slow, grim, heartbreaking acknowledgement of defeat. "I'll be back," he said, his voice raw. "I swear it." And then with a single fluid motion he was gone. He slipped out of the hole in the wall and disappeared into the darkness. I was alone. A single, terrified maid standing in a broken-down cabin, about to face a dozen of the most dangerous wolves in the kingdom. My body trembled, but my mind was clear. I was no longer a ghost. I was a weapon. I was a shield. I moved to the door. The sound of their footsteps grew louder, closer. I heard a muffled order, a low, guttural command. "Surround the cabin. No one gets out alive." I had to buy him time. I had to create a distraction. My eyes swept the room. A rickety table. A small pot-bellied stove. A pile of kindling. I had an idea. It was a terrible idea. It was a suicidal idea. But it was the only one I had. I grabbed the kindling and threw it into the stove, my hands moving with a practiced ease I had not known I possessed. I grabbed a can of kerosene I had found in the corner and splashed it over the wood. A single match was all it would take. But I didn't have a match. I only had a knife. I was a maid. I didn't have matches. Now, little mouse," a voice drawled from the other side of the door. "No need to be so scared. We just want a little chat." The voice was smooth, cruel, and laced with a terrifying confidence. "We're not here to hurt you. We're here for him. Just tell us where he went and we'll be on our way." My mind raced. He was baiting me. He wanted me to talk, to give away Asher's location. I had to keep him occupied. I had to make him believe I was just a terrified little girl. I backed away from the door, a whimper escaping my lips. He's gone," I said, my voice trembling with fear. "I don't know where he went." A low chuckle answered me. "Oh, I think you do. You're a smart one, aren't you? A little maid with a hero complex. It's almost cute." There was a long pause, a terrifying silence that was worse than the threats. "You know what we're going to do? We're going to burn this cabin to the ground and you're going to scream his name. And when he hears your screams, he will come back for you. He won't be able to help himself. He'll come back and we'll kill him." Slowly. My heart hammered against my ribs. He was not a fool. He had already guessed Asher's plan. He had already won. I had one choice left. A final, desperate gambit. I had to light this fire. I had to create enough chaos and noise to give Asher time to get away. "You're wrong," I said, my voice a sudden, surprising whisper of pure venom. "He won't come back. He's a king. And a king never goes back on his word." The laughter from outside stopped. The silence that followed was a pregnant, terrifying thing. He hadn't expected me to talk back. He had expected me to be a terrified mouse. I had just revealed a piece of the truth and I knew it was a fatal mistake. But it didn't matter. It was already over. "You have 5 seconds to open the door, little maid," the voice said, colder this time, a low, menacing growl. "Or we burn this whole thing to the ground." My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From a cold, burning resolve that had taken root in my soul. I grabbed the knife from my cloak. It was a small, useless thing, but it was all I had. I saw it then, the flickering gaslight of a broken lamp in the corner of the room. A forgotten oil lantern. It would have to do. I moved to the lantern, my eyes fixed on the door, my heart pounding in my ears. I opened the nozzle and a thick, oily fluid poured onto the kindling. I didn't need a match. I just needed a single spark. I looked at my hands, at the calloused fingers that had scrubbed floors for a decade. I had never been a fighter. I had never been a warrior. I was just a maid. But in this moment, a different kind of power coursed through my veins. It was the power of a woman who had nothing left to lose. I took a deep breath and I plunged my hand into the pool of oil. I felt it on my skin, thick and cold. I drew my hand out, my palm slick with the fluid. I turned to face the door, my heart pounding with a strange, wild exhilaration. "Tick-tock, little mouse," the voice outside the door said, and I heard the unmistakable sound of a bowstring being drawn. I looked at my hand and for a single final second, I remembered a story my mother had once told me. A story about a moon witch who could light a fire with a single touch. I closed my eyes and I focused all my energy, all my love, all my fear, all my hope, all my rage, all the grief of a lifetime into a single point. I was not a witch. I was not a wolf. I was a ghost. But my ghost was a fire. And then I touched my hand to the kindling. Nothing happened. A fresh wave of terror washed over me. The magic wasn't real. My ghost wasn't a fire. I was just a maid standing in a broken-down cabin with a knife. A fool. A coward. My resolve crumbled. I was going to die. I was going to die for a man who didn't need saving. I was going to die a pointless, meaningless death. The thought filled me with a deep, crushing despair. But then I felt it. A single, sharp jolt of pure power coursing through my veins. It was not my power. It was his. It was the mark of a king. It was the silent, unbreakable vow of a wolf who would not let his mate die. It was a spark. A single, tiny flame ignited on my palm. It was small at first, no bigger than a firefly, but then it grew. It grew into a roaring, blinding inferno that swallowed the kindling, that consumed the can of kerosene, that licked at the walls of the cabin with a ferocious hunger. I dropped the knife, the flame searing my hand, but I didn't feel it. All I felt was a rush of pure, unadulterated power. I was a ghost. But my ghost had just become a fire. I stumbled out of the cabin, the roaring flames behind me a brilliant, terrifying shield. The howling outside stopped. The soldiers, the hunters, the dogs, they all stared at the burning cabin, at the wall of fire that stood between them and their prey. They saw a maid, a ghost, a nothing. And they saw a fire. A glorious, magnificent, impossible fire. And in that moment I knew with a certainty that shook me to my very soul. My story was not over. It was just beginning. The final battle had not been won. But the first battle had just begun. My hands were shaking, but my heart was calm. I had a king to save. I had a kingdom to reclaim. I had a promise to keep. The ghost had found her purpose. She had found her fire. She had found her home. And she was not going to let it burn. The final battle raged on. The fire was a beacon in the night, a wall of pure, unadulterated fury that held Alaric's men at bay. I watched from the trees, a cold, hard resolve in my heart. He was gone. He was safe. Now I had to get to him. I had to get to the Winterstone pack. I had to get to the one person who could help us. But I was alone. A single, terrified maid against an army of trained killers. I had one shot. I had one chance. The fire raged. The hunters howled. And the ghost of a dead pack with a fire in her soul ran into the night. My story was just beginning. And it was going to be one hell of a ride. Chapter 7. The First Victory. The fire roared behind me, a living, breathing thing of orange and red that licked at the dark night sky. It was a beautiful, terrifying sound. The panicked howls of Alaric's men, their confused shouts, were a symphony of chaos that my soul drank in. They were not hunters anymore. They were just animals, confused and terrified by the wall of fire I had created. I had given them a warning. A glorious, magnificent, impossible warning. And I had to move. No. I scrambled through the trees, a ghost in the night. The light from the burning cabin cast long, dancing shadows, turning every bush and rock into a potential enemy. My body was screaming, my lungs burning with every breath, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I was not running for my life, I was running for his. He was out there, alone and wounded, and I had a promise to keep. My old life as a maid, as a ghost, was a lifetime ago. The years of trying to be invisible, of moving silently, of melting into the background, it had all been training for this one night. My senses, honed by years of living in the shadows, were my weapons now. I listened to the sound of the wind. I listened to the frantic movements of the hunters. And I listened for the one thing I was looking for, the heavy, labored breathing of a wounded wolf on the run. I felt him, a low, thrumming presence in my soul. It was the bond, the strange, terrifying, wonderful connection that had formed between us. It was a lifeline. I could feel his pain, a dull, aching throb in his leg. I could feel his exhaustion, the crushing weight of a burden he had carried for so long. And most of all, I could feel his despair, a cold, empty void in his chest that told me he thought I was gone. No, I won't let him think that. The thought, born of a fierce, desperate love, was a physical blow. It was a jolt of pure energy that coursed through my veins, pushing away the exhaustion, the pain, the fear. I was not a fragile maid anymore. I was a force of nature. I was a fire. And I was going to find my king. I moved with a purpose I had never known. I used the terrain to my advantage, hiding in the thick brush, moving from shadow to shadow. The sound of the hunters faded behind me. They were still at the cabin, baffled, confused, unable to believe that a little maid could have outsmarted them. They were looking for a terrified girl, a cowering mouse. They didn't know they were hunting a ghost. My heart pounded, but my mind was clear. I had to find him. I followed the pull, the thrumming in my soul that was his life force. It led me deeper into the forest, away from the path, away from the hunters, and into the silent, unforgiving wilderness. I didn't know how long I ran. Hours passed. The fire behind me became a distant flicker, a memory. The moon was high and cold, a silent witness to my desperate, lonely journey. I found him near a frozen stream. He was leaning against a rock, his face pale and clammy in the moonlight. His eyes were half closed and his breathing was shallow and ragged. The gash on his leg was a dark, angry wound, black with dried blood. He was shivering not from the cold, but from the fever that had begun to take hold. I knelt beside him, my hands trembling. "Asher," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Asher, I'm here. You're okay." His eyes fluttered open and he looked at me, a profound, heartbreaking relief in their golden depths. "Cora," he rasped. "You're alive." "I told you I would be," I said, my voice breaking. "I told you I was a ghost." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He reached out, his hand trembling, and touched my cheek. "Pie ghost," he whispered, and then he collapsed, his body going limp. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through me. I didn't know what to do. I was a maid. I didn't know how to treat a wolf's wounds. I didn't know how to save a king. But I had to. The fire, the rage, the purpose that had filled me, it was still there. I had to use it. I had to become something more than just a maid. I had to become a healer. I tore a piece of my cloak and I used the frigid water from the stream to wash his wound. He groaned, the sound a low, guttural protest, but I didn't stop. The blood was a dark, ugly stain on the white snow, a grim reminder of how close we were to a final defeat. I wrapped his leg tightly, but it wasn't enough. He was getting weaker. I could feel it through the bond, a faint, flickering echo of a heartbeat. He was dying. "No," I sobbed, my voice a broken thing. "You can't die. You promised. You promised you would come back." My tears fell on his face, hot and salty, and for a moment, just a single moment, the bond flared. It was a brief, powerful surge of energy, a warm, golden light that flowed from him to me, a desperate final surge of life. It was a spark. It was enough. I looked at his face, at the pale, still features, at the closed eyes. I had to find help. But where? The Winterstone pack was too far. I couldn't carry him and I couldn't leave him. I was trapped. It was over. "I won't let you die," I whispered, my voice firm with a renewed resolve. I had to do something. I had to find a way to save him. I had to become a queen. Just then a twig snapped in the darkness. I froze, my heart in my throat. I looked up and saw a tall, imposing figure emerging from the trees. Her fur was the color of fresh snow, her eyes were a deep, ancient green, and her face was a road map of lines and wrinkles. She was old. Old. But she moved with a quiet, lethal grace that told me she was not to be trifled with. She was a wolf. An alpha. And she was standing over me. "A ghost with a fire," she said, her voice a low, gravelly hum, a sound that felt as old as the mountains around us. "And a king with a broken body. The stories were true. The prophecy is real." I stared at her, my mind reeling. A prophecy? What was she talking about? Who is she? "My name is Alpha Selene," she said, her gaze fixed on Asher's still form. "And I have been waiting for you, little ghost." She knelt beside Asher, her old, gnarled hands moving over his wound with a practiced ease that made my heart pound with a fresh, impossible hope. She looked at me, her green eyes piercing my very soul. "You are more than just a maid, little ghost. You are a queen. You are the fire. And you are here for a reason. You are here to save him." The words, so unexpected, so powerful, hit me like a physical blow. A queen. I had never even dreamed of such a thing. I was a ghost. I was a maid. But as I looked at her, at the quiet, unwavering resolve in her ancient eyes, I knew the truth. She was not a foe. She was an ally. She was a leader. And she was here to help us. The final battle had not been won. But the tide had just turned. And it was all because of a maid who refused to die. The prophecy of a ghost. I woke to warmth. It wasn't the searing heat of the fire or the suffocating cold of the cabin, but a gentle, steady heat that soaked into my bones. The air smelled of wood smoke and a dozen different herbs. My body was wrapped in a thick, soft blanket, and I was lying on a bed of animal furs, a stark contrast to the cold, hard ground I had known my entire life. I sat up, my eyes wide. I was in a small, cozy hut, a fire crackling in a stone hearth. I was safe. And a few feet away, lying on a makeshift bed of furs, was Asher. His face was no longer pale and clammy, but was now flushed with a healthy color. His breathing was deep and even. A beautiful, serene old woman with snow-white hair and deep green eyes sat beside him, her hands glowing with a soft, gentle light as she moved them over his wound. She was the Alpha. The woman from the forest. Celine. I didn't say a word. I just watched in silent awe. The magic I had felt from Asher was a raw, chaotic force, a storm waiting to be unleashed. But the magic from this woman was something else entirely. It was a soft, gentle hum, a quiet song of healing and life. She sensed me before she saw me. She turned, a small, kind smile on her face. "You are awake, little ghost." Her words didn't feel like a taunt. They felt like a truth. He's going to be okay?" I asked, my voice a broken thing. "He is," she said, her voice a low, gravelly hum. "He's strong. He will heal. But his recovery would have been much longer without you." "Me? I didn't do anything." She smiled, a knowing look in her deep green eyes. "Oh, but you did. You gave him something that is worth more than any healing herb or any magic. You gave him a reason to live. You gave him hope." She gestured to a wooden bowl on a small table beside me. "Eat. You are safe here." I ate. It was a simple stew, but it tasted like the finest meal I had ever had. As I ate, I watched her. She sat in the quiet, her hands glowing with a steady, peaceful light. She was a healer. She was a protector. She was a queen in her own right. I felt a surge of awe, of reverence, of a respect I had never felt for anyone before. I had never met a woman who carried herself with such dignity, such grace, such power. I wanted to be like her. I wanted to be that strong. I finished my meal and looked at her. "Thank you," I said, "for helping us." She nodded. "It was our duty. We have been waiting for you." My heart pounded. "Waiting for us? What do you mean?" She smiled. "There is a prophecy. An old one. It speaks of a lost king, a dire wolf with a wounded heart, who would be brought back from the brink by a ghost with a fire in her soul. A ghost who would not be broken by fear. A ghost who would find her courage and her voice. A ghost who would become a fire." She looked at me, her eyes piercing my very soul. "The prophecy is real, Cora. And you are the ghost. You are the fire." The words, so fantastical, so impossible, should have sounded like madness. But they didn't. They sounded like the most profound, most beautiful truth I had ever heard. My entire life had been a lie. I had been a ghost, a maid, a nothing. But I was more. I was a part of something ancient, something sacred. I was a part of a prophecy. For the next 2 days I didn't leave Asher's side. I watched over him as he slept, as he fought the fever, as he slowly, miraculously began to heal. The wound on his leg was a raw, angry thing, but it was getting smaller. The fever broke. He was a king. But he was also just a man. And he was in my hands. On the 3rd morning he woke. He looked at me, his golden eyes clear and bright, and a slow, gentle smile spread across his face. It was not the arrogant smirk of a king. It was not the weary, defeated smile of an outcast. It was the smile of a man who had been given a second chance. "You came back," he whispered, his voice still raw from the fever. "I knew you would." My heart felt so full I thought it might burst. I reached out and touched his hand, and the bond, the silent, unspoken connection between us, flared into a brilliant, beautiful light. "I told you I wasn't going to let you die. A king keeps his word. A ghost keeps hers." We talked all day. I told him everything. My life as a maid. My ghost. My hope. My fear. He listened, his eyes never leaving my face. He told me everything. His life as a prince. His wolf, Fenris. His rage. His defeat. He told me he had been running his entire life. Running from the past. Running from the truth. running from the monster inside. And that he had never, not once, ever stopped. Not until he met me. "You are not a monster," I said, my voice firm. "You are a king. And you are here for a reason. You are here to save them." He looked at me, a profound, soul-shaking sadness in his golden eyes. "I can't. Not alone. I'm broken, Cora. I'm just a boy with a monster in his head. What good am I to anyone?" My heart ached. I knew that feeling. The feeling of being broken. Of being useless. Of being a ghost. But I had found my purpose. I had found my fire. I had to make him see his. "You're wrong," I said. "You're not a boy. You're a king. And you're not a monster. You're a warrior. And you're not alone. You have me. You have Celine. You have a new pack waiting for you. And you have a ghost with a fire in her soul." I took his hand in mine, and the bond, the fire, the light, it surged through my veins, a river of pure, unadulterated power. "We are not broken, Asher. We are a promise. We are a rebellion. We are the last hope of a dying kingdom. And we are going to fight." He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, 100 emotions raging in his golden eyes. But in their depths I saw it then, the light. The fire. King. The warrior. He had found his purpose. And I had found mine. We were not two lost souls anymore. We were a promise. We were a rebellion. We were a team. The moment was shattered by a knock on the door. It was Celine, her face grim. "He's coming," she said, her voice a low, urgent hum. "Alaric is just a day behind you. He knows where you are. He knows you're with us. He's bringing his army." The words hung in the air, cold and terrifying. Our time was up. Our moment of peace was over. We had a choice to make. Fight or die. We had to save them. We had to save everyone. And we had to do it together. The First Kingdom. The air in the mountain pass was thin and sharp, carrying the scent of rock and frozen snow. It was the scent of war. For the first time I saw the true face of Asher's pack, the Winterstone Wolves. They weren't a pack of polished nobles or brutal enforcers. They were rough, rugged, and fierce, their eyes as old and wise as the mountains they called home. They looked at Asher not with fear or pity, but with a deep, unwavering respect. He was their king. Asher, though still healing, was on his feet. The fever was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He stood at the head of the pass, his shoulders squared, the wound on his leg a faint, silvery line on his skin. I stood beside him, a maid in a borrowed cloak, a ghost with a fire in her heart. We were a promise, a rebellion, and we were waiting for an army. Celine, her ancient green eyes filled with a quiet strength, laid a hand on his shoulder. "They will come," she said, her voice a low hum. "They will come to see you as a fool. Do not prove them right." Asher nodded. "I won't. I'm no longer the boy who ran. I'm a king who stays and fights." His gaze met mine, and in that moment the world narrowed to just the two of us. There was no sound, no pack, no coming army. Just a boy with a king's soul and a ghost with a fire in her heart. He reached out and gently took my hand, his touch warm and solid. "I can't do this without you, Cora," he whispered, his voice raw. "My kingdom, my soul, it's all in your hands now. I'm yours to command." My heart ached with a sweet, beautiful pain. The maid who had spent her life invisible, who had known nothing but servitude and shame, was now being asked to lead a king. I squeezed his hand, a silent vow, a promise I would never break. "My king is strong," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "My king will not fall. I will fight with you. I will die for you." He smiled then, a genuine, heartbreaking smile that made him look like the boy he was, and not the king he would become. "I will not let you." And then we saw them. A dark, black tide of men and wolves pouring through the mountain pass, their armor gleaming in the moonlight. At the head of their army, his face a mask of pure, seething fury, was Alaric. He had come for his nephew. He had come for his throne. He had come for his vengeance. "So," Alaric's voice boomed, carrying on the wind, "the stray dog has found himself a new pack. How pathetic. Did you really think you could win? A handful of old wolves and a pathetic little human made against my army? You're a fool, Asher. And you're going to die here." Asher's hand tightened on mine. I could feel the rage of his inner wolf, Fenris, roaring in his mind, but he didn't let it consume him. He held it in check, a leashed beast of pure, unadulterated power. He was a king. And a king fights for his people, not for himself. Your army is a lie, Alaric. Asher's voice rang out clear and steady. They fight for a tyrant. My pack fights for a king. And a kingdom cannot be built on lies. It must be forged in truth. The two armies charged. The night was filled with the clash of steel, the snarl of wolves, and the roar of 1,000 angry souls. I stood on the hill, my heart in my throat. I watched as Asher, a whirlwind of steel and shadow, moved through the army, his body a blur of motion, his sword a blur of light. He was a warrior, a king, a predator. He was unstoppable. But he was still outnumbered. He was still fighting a losing battle. But he was not fighting alone. I closed my eyes and reached out, my mind a blank slate. The magic, the fire, the light. It was a part of me now, a living, breathing thing that surged through my veins. I didn't try to control it. I just let it happen. I poured all my love, all my hope, all my rage, all the grief of a lifetime into a single point. My ghost. My fire. My purpose. And then I touched the ground. The earth beneath us, the very soul of the mountains, answered my call. A massive wall of rock and ice erupted from the ground, splitting Alaric's army in two. His men stumbled, panicked, and confused. The ground cracked, fissures opening up beneath their feet, and they fell, their screams swallowed by the earth. I had not just created a shield. I had created a weapon. I had created a trap. The tide of the battle had turned. Alaric, his face a mask of pure, seething rage, saw it. He saw the rock wall. He saw his army in chaos. He saw the maid standing on the hill, her hands glowing with a soft, green light. He saw the impossible. He saw his defeat. He roared then, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury. He lunged at Asher, his sword a blur of silver, a final desperate lunge for the throne he had so desperately craved. But Asher was ready. He sidestepped the attack, his body a blur of motion. He was faster. He was stronger. He was a king. He disarmed his uncle with a single brutal twist of his arm. Alaric screamed, a high, thin sound of agony, and his sword clattered to the ground. Asher stood over him, his sword at his throat. The battle was over. The war was won. In the quiet that followed, Alaric's remaining forces dropped their weapons and knelt. They had seen the truth. They had seen a king who would die for his people. They had seen a maid who would fight for a kingdom. They had seen a prophecy come to life. Asher didn't say anything. He just stood there, his sword at his uncle's throat. He had a choice to make. He could kill him and the throne would be his. He could end the war here on this mountain. He could reclaim everything he had lost. But he didn't. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine for an answer, a confirmation. He was a king. But he was also just a man. A man who needed a purpose. A man who needed a queen. I walked to him and he lowered his sword. He knelt before me and he handed me the crown. I was no longer a maid. I was no longer a ghost. I was a queen. A queen of a kingdom that did not exist yet. A queen of a people who were waiting for a king. My people have chosen me, Asher said, his voice a low rumble. But a kingdom is built on promises. A kingdom is built on vows. Will you be my queen, Cora? Tears streamed down my face, not of sorrow but of a profound, heart-shaking joy. I knelt before him and I placed the crown on his head. I already have my king. And he, in turn, placed a crown on my head, a small, simple circlet of silver and winterwood. It was not a crown of a queen. It was a crown of a dire wolf, a crown of a ghost, a crown of a fire. It was the crown of a new kingdom. And we, the king and the ghost, the promise and the rebellion, stood there in the quiet of a cold mountain pass, and we knew with a certainty that shook us to our very souls, that our story had just begun.